Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, no matter where you are in the world. This is Howie, and I'm here to help you win with money. In today's episode of Exposed by Math, I would love to cover something really controversial. Is debt really bad, or can debt be good? Is cash really king? So let's go on and let's try to solve this. And before I begin, I'd like to start off with a famous quote from Albert Einstein: compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't will pay it. And why do I show that when I'm talking about debt? Well, because he's right. If you're paying compound interest, you're losing money. And it can get very expensive. In fact, if you bought something like a pair of sneakers and put on a credit card and it took you 5 or 10 years to pay it off, you can see that the sneaker cost you way more than what you expected. So when compound interest is working against you, it is really bad. So what happened when you are earning compound interest? In fact, it can be really good now because you're the person earning the money and not the bank. So that's what we're going to cover today. And before I go on, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about me. I am an E. If you ever read Robert Kiyosaki's book, Cash Flow Quadrant, he talks about there's E, S, B, and I. So I am an employee, and I like to think of myself more of an investor, even though I have basically created a whole career around the E. But I've done better than most people, and it wasn't because I had a high income. It wasn't because I got promoted. It wasn't because of anything else except I think like an investor. And this is why I want to show you how dividends and my portfolio really help me look at things from a debt to asset point of view. And that's when I decided, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've been thinking about this for a long time, never created a video, I wasn't into social media, but I wanted to talk about this because some people wonder about this, and I figured the best way to solve it is to create a video and demonstrate some of the math. So what is it? Is debt really bad? What about good debt versus bad debt? What about, I want to model something out today. Is buying your car with cash better than using debt? And we know there's somebody famous who does this. We heard this before. You should use a sinking fund, put some money in cash, save it up, and then pay cash for it. Is it true? So I'm going to show you. What I think based on some simple math. And then I'm going to show you and maybe talk about some of the various factors or other parameters that you have to think about. Because in some cases in life, it's not just a one answer fits all. That's like saying Roth IRA is always better. Well, not true. Well, it's like saying, is cash always better? Well, I'm going to try to show it to you. Is it true or not? I don't think it's true. So that's why Albert Einstein, this concept of compounding interest, we need to look at it and see how it works. And I like to also cover things like what happened about different interest rates. Does it really matter if one interest rate is greater or less, or if it's equal, and I want to model that out. We'll try different numbers. What about the loan terms? It does matter or does it not matter? So we want to talk about some other stuff. And also, I do want to touch a little bit on what the biblical teaching is. Is all debt bad or good? And does that really help us determine what's the approach that we're going to use? So let's get right on to this. I'm going to create a case study where the first person has no money today. They're going to get a loan for a car. So the bank will look at their ability to repay the loan. So banks normally use something like a debt to income ratio, right? If you're making very little, they're not going to loan you a lot of money because they know that you cannot afford it. They want to make sure that you have enough money to pay this car note off. And in one sense, this is a scenario where you're paying interest to the bank. This is the cost of borrowing money. So let's get right to it. I'm going to use an online calculator to see how much a car loan will cost. And here you go. I just went to a online calculator. In my example, let's just use $35,000, 0% down. For right now, we're going to use an 8% interest rate. We'll do a 72-month term, and then we calculate. So this is the answer. So I'm going to take a screenshot of this real quick and then copy it into a spreadsheet. And here you go. This is what it looks like. I created a spreadsheet real quickly. I pasted it in. So now I want to do some simple math. I'm going to model this out, but before we do so, let's shrink this down. I'm going to show you what I end up doing. I want to create some formula that says the car note is 8%. And then we're going to model some of these numbers out. So let me just fix something out here. I want to make sure these numbers are accurate based on the amortization schedule that I just created. So very quickly, you'll see there's a schedule on this website. And all I have to do is just look 1 year apart. So for example, the first year will be over here. And then all I have to do is, I did change it to November, so I hit recalculate, and then you'll see that if you start in November, then next year will be right here. That is over here. And then I just copied it all in, and you'll see that the car note will be paid off. And then what I want to do is show you if you repeat the process for a new car the second year. But this is how I did it. So that's the first thing. So this is what it looks like if you just bought a car using debt. Okay, for the next piece, let's do case study B. We want to do something that saves, someone who saves cash at the same payment that this guy's doing, and then we'll model that out in the Excel. And this is what it will look like. I created a new row. This is case B. You see the monthly is the same. I'm going to show you why I started in the third year so you can see this. This is the year where you're going to buy a new car. And then I'm going to show you this piece here. This is the third year. We'll just put some coloring in here. These you don't need anymore. These are the negative amortization amounts. Okay, let me explain this. So in the third year, you see this guy's saving money. He hit $35,000. So this guy's going to hit $35,000 to buy a car in cash. That's what this is showing you. Then the next thing he's going to do is he's going to spend $35,000 for it. And that's what that will look like. And so the net, if you do a net, it will just be the summation of those two cells. Just for simplicity's sake, we're just going to do it like this. We'll make that yellow. Okay? So what does this mean? So now he bought the car. This is how much. He's now going to save, because he paid in cash, he's going to save $613, which is the same amount of money this guy's paying. And at the end of this guy, when he's done at year 9, he's done. He finished paying off the $35,000 car with $9,000 interest, $9,100. This guy, on the other hand, you can see at the end of this time frame, he has $44,000 from all the money. This is, by the way, assuming it's 0% interest rate. I believe I factored that in already. It's 0%. And then I'm going to show you what happens in year 10 when he buys another car, another $35,000. He's back to zero again. This guy will have $16,000 now, and then it will continue on. So in this case, you see anybody who's using a loan, it's going to fall further behind. He has no money. In fact, he pays $9,000 away to the bank. And then you can see how this numbers work. You see this? 44,164 is the total payment, which is the same number here. So this guy will now have 44. And look, I did this manually. So you see that? It's all formula based. So I came up to the same number that the bank is going to get for this guy. So you can see in this model, who wins? It's the guy who saved cash. And you expect that. You almost can see how somebody who goes into debt, buying a car will be negative $9,000. This guy, when he buys a car, every month he's putting away $613 into his account. And then at the end of it, he has more cash to buy another car. So we see that. So we agree that the cash saver wins. And Dave Ramsey is right. By using sinking funds for cars, you can see how case study B wins. But my question is this. Do you think there's a better way? There's case study A, case study B. Is it possible that if I show you how using debt can be the answer, would you believe me? I know. I'm not going to try to make up a new scenario like A, B, C, D, E, F, and the guy who wins the lottery or the guy who car hacks or rented on Turo. Let's keep it really simple, right? But if I show you that if I introduce another case study, but I'm going to use debt in this example, and I'm not going to overcomplicate it, and would you believe me that there are cases where it does make sense? And as always, let's go to the Excel sheet and let's go model it out. So the first thing I'm going to do is something really strange. I'm going to show you, copy that, and then we'll do something like this. And then we're going to copy this guy, and then we're going to do something like this. And then we're going to do something a little bit easier than this. We'll do a summary, and then we'll do what if we did something like okay, so but I'll leave the colors. I'm sorry, I should have left the colors so you can sort of see where each row represents. Okay, and I'm gonna call it, that's A and B. Same monthly payment, same number. So if you look at the blue, he gets up here. Now, the only difference is I have to change this slightly. This is now, yep, that's still the same. He's going to have a loan. The only difference is he is no longer going to reset this number back to, so I just have to change it like that minus, let me just fix this real quick. Hang on one second. Let me go fix the formula. So now I took the time to combine it. Here's case study A, case study B, and in this one, I'm going to call it AB. I'm going to use the exact same numbers. So you see this guy saved up $21,000 a year. He had $21,000. I didn't show you the whole life of this guy's history, but he's saving $600 a month, $613, and then he gets to here, and in third year he gets here and he buys a car. So what happens? He spends it in cash. So in this case, I'm going to combine the methods. So this number you see is a direct from here. So everything you see, it's the same loan. So the same guy here in A who used a car loan, that's $35,000. The car loan is here. We already saw it. It's $613.66. Total interest, 0% down, 8% loan, 72 months. Same guy. So we're going to use the same loan over here. That's why I colored it gray. And if you do the summation, in year 3, everybody's equal. Oh, I'm sorry, not everybody. This guy's negative $35,000. This guy's at 0 because he has $35,000 saved. He spent cash for it, and now he's back to 0. And this guy is using the combination. He's actually kept the $35,000 in the bank, and he's going to get a loan for $35,000, so his net worth is 0. And how do you know these numbers match? If you just look at the numbers, I summed it up, and if you just scroll down here, look what happens at year 9. When this guy is out of the loan, he has $35,000. And then you can see this real interesting. He has a car loan. And look at this number here. The difference is this $9,183, which is the same difference of the interest he paid. Because if you subtract the difference, and I'll show you what I mean real quick. I'm subtracting this guy, this number from this guy. And you'll see that. And it should, because if you combine the two strategies, we should see something like that. But now this is the part that's going to get really interesting. You ready for this? This is the part that you may not understand. I'm going to change the interest rate to 8. So it's all dynamic. And look what happens. The guy who paid cash is here. His numbers don't change. I mean, the guy with the car loan, because the car loan is this one here. But the guy with cash, you see how this has now interest now. And I'll show you what I mean. You see this $54,000? If you put 0, boom. That means all this money is earning 0%. But we want to be right and we want to be fair. We're going to give him 8% rate of return. And what that shows you is this guy is accumulating a little bit of wealth because he's earning 8% on his money. And this is why there's a big difference between this guy and this guy. He is now 54,000. This guy has nothing to show for it. And then year number 10, he buys a $35,000 car. This guy's already up 30 grand because look, you subtract 35 grand, he still has 30 grand in cash. And this is why I model it out into the third, fourth, fifth year. If you want to see how many cars you have, I can model that out. But I want to show you something really unusually interesting. So let's take an eye on this one. This guy now is saying, what is the difference? The summary, by using both strategies, he's actually ahead by $171. And here he's actually ahead by $370. And if you keep on scrolling, by the time year 9 comes around where the car is paid off, you see this? He also has $54,000. And his car loan finally hits 0. If you look at the formula, all it is just earning the previous thing plus the 8%. That's what this is. There is no extra $600 added because he was paying down his loan. So I made sure that I was comparing apples to apple. But it doesn't even matter because when he had the loan, even in the first year, he's coming out ahead. And I want you to see that. So when you blend everything together, we're using the same numbers. The winner is case study C, or what I call the model AB, because I'm combining this guy's results and this guy's result together. And it's even better than the guy using B. Now, some of you may not understand that. You can rewind it and I'll talk about it more in detail. But why does this work? Well, whenever you spend the $35,000 in cash, it resets to 0. And that money, regardless if you had it in a money market, savings account, checking account, or some type of investment portfolio, it goes back to 0 and you repay it off. So in this model, of course, Dave Ramsey is right, if you have this low interest rate. But what I wanted to show you is if the numbers were the same rate as the loan, you're going to win. And in fact, I want to model this out using the Dave Ramsey rate of return. Anybody who followed Dave Ramsey know he said any investor can make 12% return. So because of that, let's model it out using his 12%, just to be fair. So any investor can make 12%. And if you plug this in, let's see what happens. This is the cash guy, 12% rate of return. By the time year 9 comes around, he has $59,000. And then the next car he buys, he would actually have 74 minus 35 is 39. But look what happens. I'm already ahead of him now by $9,000. And it actually increases going forward. And that's even getting out loans. You see how the numbers work? I modeled it out for 2 cars. And I'll explain that a little bit later. So we'll see this. In year 1, because you're using a 12% rate of return, I'm actually ahead even greater than I was before. So what this is telling you is it's worth it getting a loan, even if you had the cash to buy it. Because if you use a Dave Ramsey return rate on your investment, now I'm saying you're going to make 12% rate of return on the money that you already have in cash, which is this line here, because that's the same number we're going to use for this guy. He used it all cash, but he's earning 12% rate of return on his money. So that's the concept here. So what you will see is you still come out ahead by 9,000. Then by the year 10, you're ready to buy another car. It's 35,000. So this guy will now have 84,000. This guy have 74,000. You subtract the 35. He's at the 39. My net worth is now up to 49, 10,000 ahead. And if you just keep on modeling this out, I want to make sure I did the math right over here. It's the loan, the net worth together. Hang on one second. I want to make sure there's no mistake here. There's a mistake over here, but not because this mistake is because this formula is using it for this guy. This guy should never go down because he's taking a loan out. So you can see that this formula is wrong. It should be, there you go. That looks better. And I know you may say it's impossible, but this is the right way because his money is still growing at 12%. whereas his loan is also at 8%, which is fine because these are the numbers we use. Yeah. And that makes sense to me because the best way to check it is always use like a 0 to make sure your numbers don't deviate too far. So let's just double check everything. I want to make sure all the numbers look right. Like I said, that work makes sense. That makes sense. He's up to 44. I want to make sure something is not wrong. This guy is adding 6, yeah, and then he's up to 16 after he buys it. This guy is slightly behind because he has 42. And then he's tracked to 35. So he's actually behind him at this point. 1 second, I want to make sure oh, I think I see an error. Let me fix this first before we go on. Okay, I think I fixed the bad formula. So again, I want to double check everything. You see, I'll start with 0 again. If you model it at 0, it's always easy to check the first year because the interest rate here, the total difference should be the interest you paid. And you see how that matches this? So that looks good. The second year, you see this? He's falling further behind and it should be twice the interest rate, which makes sense. I'm at twice the interest rate. If the interest is 0 and your interest rate on the car loan is 8. So now the numbers work. It will show you that this guy will always win. If your interest rate is at 0, he's 18,000 behind. Now that I fixed it, if you use 8, where the interest rate equal, remember, the guy who's using debt now is ahead, and you can see that it's only a little bit ahead, $100, $200, and then look, by the time you get your second car, you see it's really the same. You see this? It only grows by $100 or $200 difference. So, and that makes sense because this guy's at 30 grand. His account is still growing slightly faster than this guy's account because he had more money. And then here, when you reset to 35, it's 35. You see how I did the math? It's 65,000 minus the 35, but you're still timing the 1.08% interest rate, so you're up to 40 the next year. This guy, because he's using a loan, has a second line item here. So we had to do the net, so he's at 42 versus 40. And then every year, you see his growth is accelerating from this guy. And so it doesn't matter how often you repeat this, it's going to work. And now we can use the 12%. Now that I fixed it, now if you use the Dave Ramsey rate of return, all Dave Ramsey fans should be the case study AB, because if you really believe he'll give you 12% rate of return, you should use this one. Because look, by the time your first year car is done, you're ready to buy the second car and you're up to 84,000. You're already 10,000 ahead of the traditional Dave Ramsey thinking, which is use cash or sinking fund. And look, if you just look at this, the numbers it just grows and you're getting ahead, further ahead each year. You see by year 15 or 16, you're already 26,000 ahead, and you can repeat this process. Always get a loan. And keep your money fully vested, making 12%. Now, everybody knows when you're modeling, I want to show you something really interesting. Even if you use 7%, where the interest rate is less than the car loan, you see it's pretty close by. You're still pretty close. You're only $100 away from this guy who did it right. So you're underperforming the loan, and you're still better off than this guy who's still broke. And the difference is you don't need to be a great investor to get 7%. And you're only $100 or $200 away from the other guy. Now, it does increase. You see that? It changes over the years. But my point is, I wanted to show you that your investment rate of return, and while we marked it red, it doesn't, really red is not a good color. But my point is, if you got a decent interest rate, and I'm talking about matching the car rate, you would do better. And if you got 9%, I'm sorry. Hang on, wrong number. If you got 9%, you will see, you will always make more money. Now, there's a couple things I cannot model out in this one video. If you got a loan with different terms, right? I picked 72 months. You could have used an 84. We could have used different interest rate. There's so many other factors to model. I'm not going to cover every scenario. But I wanted to show you that there are cases where having debt still works. Now, if you use a shorter loan, it may be a different output. If you use a longer loan, it may be a different output. You still need to model it out because the answer will have a different crossover point. So I want to make sure you guys understand this. Am I saying that in every scenario will work? Of course not. There are times where the 0%, they will win using the sinking fund. But there are many times where using a lower percentage, you'll still win, right? And this is why it's good to model it out so you understand it. Because look, even in the 7.5%, eventually I'll make money over time. So this is what I'm saying my interest rate is less than the car note. Now here's the funniest thing. There are many of us who can get car notes for 5%. I have seen 3.99, 2.99, even 1.99% when you go out to the web. If you have good credit, you can get that. So the point of this, whatever your investment return is, if you can beat the car note, you're going to make money. So what I'm saying is, that's what I'm saying. When I'm using the term beat means equal or beat, right? But I even modeled it out where you can see even if it's lower, you can beat it. Now here's the problem. If your car note is 18%, 16%, 15%, or 12.99, it may not work because it means you have bad credit. And you would need your interest rate return to be greater than that. And unless you're a perfect or really great investor and you always can beat it, I would say for you, maybe it's not going to work. Because this is why modeling matters. If you have a horrible interest rate because you have poor credit, this will not work for you. And I don't suggest you doing something like that. I'd rather you fix your credit because you can do that in less than a year's time. I know because I did. I moved my credit score over 100 points in a matter of weeks. Was able to get new credit cards. I earned credit card bonus points. I got the subscriber bonuses for the Chase Sapphire, and then I got another bonus points for the Marriott Amex, the American Express Marriott card. So anyway, that's a different video, different time. But what I wanted to show you is if you have that issue, then this is really not what you should focus on. You should fix your credit, fix the reason why you got bad credit. But once you fix that, you can get car loans cheaper than what you can make in other investments. And here you go. I have shown that even using a conservative interest rate on my investments, the guy who's using the blended approach will still win. So there's some rule of thumbs. So the rule of thumb is, I demoed this already to you. If the interest rates are equal, it's generally a wash, but you can see that even in my modeling of the 35,000 starting, the winner was still the guy who used a blended approach. If you use a larger capital or larger investment base, like let's say your grandma or your grandpa gave you $1 million when you were a kid and you have a bigger base, should you sell that $1 million portfolio you have to buy a house in cash? And the answer is no, because the bigger your capital is, the better your outperformance will be. Okay? So the second thing is, makes sense. If the interest rate is relatively, right, so that's relatively equal. If the interest rate is greater for your assets than for debt, then using debt is always going to be better. And this is why so many investors are in this type of bucket thinking. They can generate a greater return than their cost of borrowing the money. This is why people teach this concept of using other people's money. And you hear that in real estate circles. You even hear it in stock market circles, if you can guarantee the rate of return. Now, stock market is different. You're not going to always guarantee it. If you do one or two bad bets or whatever it is, you can actually be in trouble because now you're leveraging it. You owe money on money that you didn't have. In real estate, we generally know that there are people who've been doing it longer. It's a little bit easier to manage the risk. But it's still there. There's still risk using other people's money. But the point is, there are many people who've done it, and this is why it works. So the last question is this really bad? Is debt bad? And so I want to answer it in a different way. I like looking at debt to asset ratio. So if you have $200,000 in debt and only 50 grand in assets, it generally means you're carrying a lot of debt, and your debt may cost you a lot of money out of your future paycheck or however you're servicing it, because you're not servicing that debt from the $50,000 in asset, right? Your ratio is 4-to-1. So you have 4 times as many debt as you do assets. And that's really bad. What if you have the reverse? If you have $50,000 in debt and $200,000 in assets, your ratio is 0.25, which is very good, right? Anything under a 1 is considered pretty good. And the lower you get is even better, right? Some people have close to 0 because if you have 0 debt, it's going to be 0. So the key is this. If you get your assets growing faster than your debt, you're really increasing your net worth. So it doesn't matter if you add another rental property to your portfolio, right? Because if you're adding a rental property that's worth $200,000 and your outstanding debt to service that rental property may only be $180,000 because you had to put some type of down payment down, right? Your balance sheet is still looking pretty healthy. And that's really the key of all this. Managing debt in the right proportions to your asset is super important. And this is why I like using some debt to asset ratios, because this is how I know I'm comfortable with managing my debt. I keep my numbers really low. I keep it so low where my assets can generate enough interest and dividends to cover all my debt if I wanted to. And so for me, it's a little bit different. Like I said, it's pretty wise. So the question is, and I use an example of buying a car using debt. If debt can be used not only is it always going to be bad then? In a biblical principle, we like to use this Proverbs 22:7, the borrower is slave to the lender. And while that's true, the question is all debt bad then? Because if you're a really good investor that isn't managing the debt wisely to make even more money, grow faster than the other scenario, like the cash investor, then this is the question that I'm posing. Is it really always bad? Or is it only bad when you're not managing it correctly and you don't have cash flow to cover all your debt? And that's what I wanted to ask, because in one sense, it is not for everyone still. But I do want to teach this concept that if you're investing, you've been doing this for a long time, you can see that going cash is really not a good strategy for me. I'm at a point where I'm okay with adding new debt to my balance sheet. Like I said, because I already told you, I can cover my debt or cover the cost of borrowing just in my passive income. I can cover it using interest that I earn, dividends that I earn. I'm not even talking about other stuff that I do. So I do other stuff that I can make 12, 13, 18% return on my money. I'm not even talking about those other things. I'm just talking about just using dividends in my portfolio. I can cover the debt that I'm charged each year from the bank. So for me as an investor, it doesn't make sense for me to liquidate any assets to do so. And it's even true in this low interest rate environment. In the future, the numbers may look totally different. If we're in an 8 or 9% interest rate environment, I have to do the math and you got to do it again and see what my rate of return is on my asset. So it's always going to be a question of what can I do? Is it manageable? Can I reasonably beat the spread? And like I said, I don't even have to beat the spread. I modeled it out. I showed that it worked. But I am beating the spread. And in most investors understand, if you beat the cost of borrowing, it's just free money. You're going to make more money. And really all you have to do is just scale the process over and over to make even more. So that brings me to the end of this video. And I know some of you may agree with this. Some of you may disagree with it. And really, I wanted to show you the math, to show you the concepts of why it will work and why it doesn't. In a case where your investments are earning 0% interest rate, then of course, saving cash will be better because there's a cost of borrowing. In the case where your interest rate of earnings and borrowing are equal, I showed you that you can still win taking on debt. And for all those who believe they can make more money in their investments than they can from the cost of borrowing, then that's when using cash is really not a good thing and borrowing, it becomes a better option. And again, whether you like it or dislike it or hate me or hate me because of that, there's a lot of things to consider. You got to look at how you spend. You got to look at your budget. And there are a lot of other things. You got to look at the cost of borrowing. In a low interest rate environment, you see that you're paying mortgage at a 1.8, 2% or 2.5%. Some people are getting loans that are pretty cheap. You can borrow loans really cheap, 5, 6, 7, 8% maybe. And the stock market returned well over 17% this year. There are many people earning more than the 8 or 9 or 10% from the historical averages. There are many real estate investors who generally can make more than 8 or 9 or 10%. Not everybody does. There are people who own apartment complexes or certain other investments, right? Their investment returns are way higher than the average person. They can make 16% on their commercial property. Whereas me and you, if you're owning one real estate property and it's a single family house, you may not be doing so well. So this is why I don't want to use a blanket statement and just assume that all investors will outperform or do better, and that's not the case. But I also want to be able to explain that, look, if you're in that position and you're doing better, your investments can make more money than the cost of borrowing or even equal the cost of borrowing, then you can see why this makes sense. And that's really a preview into some of the thinking of why infinite banking people do the same concept. Because there is a concept where at some point I can borrow money out of my life insurance policy and buy another investment where I think is undervalued relative to the current market. And over time, even a short period of time, 2 years, 5 years, I can make my money back because the value was mispriced. And I can make all the money back, make a greater profit, repay back my loans, and still come out ahead, and then repeat the process anytime I want. So there are many other factors to use to think about this, but investors understand this concept. Hey, so comment below. Really, let me know if this makes sense to you. Do you believe that the cash investor always comes out ahead? Do you think Dave Ramsey is always right then? Or do you see that sometimes it's the new approach? It's the guy with the money, he didn't cash out, he took on a loan, and he still came out relatively as good as the guy who used cash to buy the car. And that's what I hope you saw when I used the 7% interest rate. If you didn't remember, go back to my video where I used 7%, the loan was 8, and you're only about $400 behind the guy who paid cash, which means your investment is still growing, you're still making money, and you're relatively doing pretty good. Anyway, that's all. Hey, let's do this together. Let's do this $1 at a time. And as always, have a profitable day. Bye-bye.